Yes, hello. I'm here with Ian again, and we're talking about Homer's Odyssey. We're kind of going more from the Emily Wilson translation. It's a newer, more literal translation. I think Christopher Nolan's new movie is sort of based on that translation. And we also have the Robert Fagle's little bit older, maybe 25 years old, a little bit more sort of poetic translation. So today we're talking about book seven. This is when Odysseus has washed up on the shore of Scheria, and he was welcomed by Nausicaa, a vision of beauty, and he needs to go to her father's kingdom, King Alcinous, and kind of get cleaned up and get gifts and help to get on his way when on his way back home. So we'll talk about book seven. And then we'll talk about this interesting and important Greek concept, Xenia, Zenia. And this is talked about a lot in the Emily Wilson introduction. But it basically means hospitality and sort of friendship. And it took on a special role in Greek culture and in this poem. So, yeah, without further ado, I guess we'll kind of give a summary of book seven and then talk about those things.
Sounds good. So at the end of this is sort of follow up on our last episode on beauty. Um, we come right back in, and Odysseus is waiting in a grove outside of the main town there, where the Phaeacians kind of have their center of culture. And meanwhile, the Princess Nausicaa is brought by her mules and her cart up to her father's palace. Her brothers gather around her and help unharness the mules and take the clothes in. She goes into her room where she meets her slave, Eurymedusa, if I'm saying that correctly. And Eurymedusa is described as sort of being her babysitter or her nursemaid when she was growing up. She's a slave woman who came from Apere by ship many years before, and the people chose to give her to King Alcinous, because they bowed before him like a god. So, an interesting little portal view into the social structures here. But Eurymedea takes care of Nausicaa, lights her fire, gives her a meal, and she goes to bed, I assume, or at least gets fed. Um, then next little bit, Odysseus is walking into town, and Athena, his patroness, has surrounded him with a mist, so nobody sees him. Um, just kind of invisibility cloak sort of a thing, it seems like. Because I can't imagine if somebody's literally covered in fog and there's this little cloud of fog walking through the town, people are probably going to notice that. So he manages to make it through the town, and no one sees him, but a young, bright-eyed girl who is also Athena secretly comes to meet him. She disguises herself as a young, unmarried girl with a water pitcher, and she stops in front of him, and he says, "Hey, child, can you help me find King Alcinous? I traveled here from a long way. I'm a foreigner, and I know no one here in town or anywhere around." And the disguised goddess calls him, at least in the Emily Wilson translation, Mr. Foreigner, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
With twinkling eyes, the goddess answered, "Mr. Foreigner, I will take you where you want to go." Um, so she takes him through town, um, and brings him to Alcinous's castle. Odysseus is amazed at the ships in the harbor and the meeting places of the noblemen. It's all sort of described as this wondrous center of civilization. And when they get to the palace, Athena says to him, "If you go inside, you'll find the king and queen at dinner. Don't be scared. The brave succeed at everything, even those who come from far away. First thing you have to do is greet the queen. Her name is Arete." And we find out in a weird thing, I don't know if this was weird for the Greeks, but it's definitely weird nowadays that Alcinous is actually Arete's uncle. Alcinous and his brother Rhexenor are descendants of the giants. There's the giants. Um, Eurymedon, giant king Eurymedon had a daughter, Peribue, and Poseidon thought she was pretty hot, so he sleeps with her. They have a child. The child is Nausithous, and he becomes the king in Phaeacia. Nausithous has two children, Alcinous and Rhexenor. Rhexenor does something to anger Apollo. Apollo kills Rhexenor. Rhexenor is left with no son, only a daughter, and her uncle Alcinous marries her. Seems real creepy to me, but different cultures, different standards, I guess. Because no one says anything bad about it. It says she's precious to him, to her children, and to the people. We look at her as if she's a goddess. She's very clever and perceptive. If she looks on you kindly, then you have a chance of being sent home. So Athena sort of talks up Queen Arete to Odysseus as like she's the one you want to focus on. And at that, Athena leaves him, and she goes across the land and across the water, and she comes to Marathon, to Athens, where she goes inside uh, Erechtheus's palace, which I wonder if that's the temple to Athena in Athens, but who knows?
Hmm.
I don't know my Greek architects. But she ends up back in Athens, so she kind of goes back to her seat of power in the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, Odysseus is approaching the house, and we get a very long description of the doors of the house. The threshold is made of bronze. The walls are bronze, and there's some sort of blue along the walls. The doors are gold. There are pillars of silver. The door handles are gold. The lintel over the door is silver. There are silver and golden dogs around, made by Hephaestus, the god of smiths, and smithery and fire and all those things. They've been made by him for brave Alcinous. They're immortal dogs, unaging, and they will guard the home for all time. Um, Through the walls, through the doorways, into the inner rooms, there the workmanship of women, delicate throws, fine weavings. Uh, and there are thrones, and the lords and ladies are sitting upon them, eating and drinking, since they lack for nothing. There are, I assume, statues. Boys made of gold were set on pedestals with burning torches. They light the hall at night for those eating dinner. The king had 50 slave girls in his house, some of whom grind yellow grain, others weave cloth. Um, and just as the Phaeacian men have a special talent for sailing, so too do the women have a special talent for weaving, because Athena gave them fine minds and skill to make most lovely things. Um, and then, so we sort of have this view of the doors of the palace and into the palace and into the heart of the palace. And then we're taken back outside. And outside of the courtyard doors, there grows an orchard of 4 acres, trees with a bunch of fruit, apples, pears, pomegranates, figs, olives. And the crop never runs out or withers in winter nor in summer. It grows all year round. The west wind always blows and makes it ripen pears and apples, grapes and figs. There's a fertile vineyard. Where the warmer side, there's a flattened slope where they dry the grapes and they pick them and they trample them. So it's described as this very lush and abundant landscape. There are 2 springs. One flows through the gardens, watering all the trees and the vineyards, and the other gushes from the courtyard threshold towards the palace, so that the people can draw fresh water. And all this is a sign that the gods have blessed King Alcinous and his home and his land with lovely gifts. Standing there at the doorway between this courtyard and this lovely garden, long-suffering Odysseus is astonished in his heart. And he quickly strides into the palace. He goes in amongst the lords and ladies, who are pouring out drink offerings to sharp-eyed Hermes, to whom they give libations before bed, which I think sort of means the party's wrapping up. I think that's what that's meant to convey. And he goes in, and he's still hidden in the mist, and he comes up to Queen Arete and falls down and grasps her around the knees, as he had wanted to do or been inclined to do with Nausicaa, the princess on the beach, but had decided not to.
Mm.
So here we see him sort of appealing to the matron of the house. And as soon as he does so, the mist disappears, and everyone is shocked to see this man suddenly in the middle of the room, appealing to the queen. And he says, I've had many years of pain and loss. I beg you, your husband and these men who feast here, may the gods bless you. Please help me get home. I miss my family. I have been gone so long that it hurts. And then he sits down in the ashes by the fire after making his plea to the queen. And everybody's kind of quiet and in shock. But here you have the call to Xenia. You have the stranger coming into the center of the ruling class and saying, "Help me! I'm a wanderer. What are you going to do?" And he sits down in the ashes. And then old Achilles, the elder statesman of Phaeacia, learned man, speaks up and says, Alcinous, you know it's not right to leave a stranger sitting in the ashes. Everybody's waiting for you to give the word, welcome him, and help us make libations to Zeus, who loves the needy and the wanderers, and then bring him some food and some drink. So the king is sort of set right by this elder statesman, and he does the right thing. He sort of his son Laodamas has been sitting next to him, and he sort of sends him off and welcomes Odysseus, seats him next to him, next to Alcinous, orders a slave girl to come and bring him water so he can wash, and then they bring food and drink, um, and lay that before Odysseus. The king turns to the wine boy and asks the wine boy to mix the wine and the honey, the sweetness, a little bit, and give it out to everybody so we may pour out an offering to Zeus, thundering Zeus, and then make sure everybody has enough to actually drink. So they pour out a little bit to Zeus, and then everybody kind of has a nice bowl of wine to drink. Um, and Alcinous makes a speech at this point. Everybody's kind of settled. The room's a little back to normal vibes. And Alcinous says, the feast is over. Everybody go home and go to bed. At dawn, we'll gather, us and more of our best men will gather. We'll host the stranger. We'll offer sacrifices to the gods and plan how we can help him on his journey. So our guest may travel quickly, with no trouble, however far away it is, until he reaches home. Um, and then he sort of throws this sly little thing in. But if he is an immortal come from heaven, this guest, this strange man who appeared in the middle of the room, then it seems the gods have changed their ways, since in the past they used to show themselves to us directly. Whenever we would give them offerings, they would sit and eat among us in their full, maybe not their full, but presenting as themselves. And he says, even if one of us would meet a god alone out walking, they would reveal them, they would not hide themselves. We are close friends to the gods, as we are with the giants and the Cyclops. Cyclopes, however you say it, the Cyclopic people. Um, and Odysseus, sort of being the wily man that he is, speaks well. And he says, no, no, please don't think I'm a deathless god. I'm a normal man. I look like a man. I have as much pain as any man that you know. I have suffered a lot. I can tell you the stories of the suffering that the gods have willed upon me, but please, I'm hungry. My belly is whining like a dog. My heart is full of sorrow, but my stomach is always telling me to eat and drink. It tells me to forget my sufferings and fill it up. At dawn tomorrow, help me reach my homeland after all this pain, that I may live out my final days in sight of my property and slaves and home. Um, and so he sort of reassures them he's not a god. He doesn't actually say he's going to tell them his story, but he kind of implies that he will. And he just asks, he says, he's tired. Can I please just eat? But he does it in a way that they're sort of inclined to agree. And they do, and they agree. And they pour out their offerings to Zeus, and they drink as much as they desire, and everybody goes home and goes to bed. And Odysseus is left in the hall with Arete and Alcinous. So it's just the three of them, more or less. At least that's the camera. The camera's focused on the three of them. Um, and Arete has, in the meantime, noticed that Odysseus is wearing very nice clothes that Odysseus got from Nausicaa on the beach. And Arete noticed that, hey, those are our clothes. Those are things that I made myself. And so Arete says, stranger, let me be the first to speak with you. Where are you from, and who gave you those clothes? I thought you said you drifted here by sea. So she's already kind of testing out his story and probing him. And Odysseus, again, very, very skillfully, very carefully, tells a little bit of his story. He says, it'd be difficult to tell you the whole thing, but I'll tell you this. I was out on Ogygia, where Calypso lives, and I was there for a long time. I was there because Zeus had wrecked my ship and killed all my comrades, and I was floating in the waters. And on the 10th night, they carried me to Ogygia, where I was captured by Calypso, and she cared for me lovingly and vowed to set me free from death and time forever, meaning she sort of promised to make him a god if he would be her husband,
Hmm.
as happened in the Greek myths quite a lot. You would have this sort of be raised up by as a lover of a divinity, you would be raised up to divinity alongside them.
Hmm.
But Odysseus, maybe one of the first people to do this, says, "No, no,
Hmm.
I have a longing for home. She never swayed my heart." He says, "I stayed for 7 years. She gave me clothes like the gods, but they were always wet with my tears. And at the 8th year, Zeus commands that he must leave. And so Odysseus says, Calypso sent me upon a well-bound raft equipped with food, as if for the gods, and a fair wind, and he sails off." Which is interesting because if I remember correctly, Calypso makes him build the raft, and
Yeah.
he just doesn't badmouth Calypso at all here. He just talks her up,
Yeah.
kind goddess. So again, we have this sort of
Smart.
warrior who also has these like social political skills,
Yeah.
sort of keeping everybody in the best light possible. So he sails on, from Ogygia. Poseidon wrecks his raft because Poseidon hates him. Um, and he sort of gets towed here and there, and he comes across the land of the Phaeacians. But there are rocks, and he's a little worried, so he kind of swims around. He finds a river mouth, and it seems sheltered, and so he goes into the. He describes himself as, he goes into the river mouth, flopped and tried to gather up my strength until the holy nightfall. He crawls out of the rain-fed river to the bank and hid in some bushes, covered himself with leaves, and sleeps all night until noon. And at noon, in afternoon, he is woken by the girls playing on the beach, including their daughter, Nausicaa, and her slaves. He very, very kindly describes, one would not think a girl as young as her would have so much good sense. Young people are usually not so thoughtful. She was so kind to me. She gave me food and wine and had them wash me in the river and let me have these clothes. So he sort of makes their daughter look quite good. And he says, "Now I've told you the truth, no matter what." He's not lying, but he's also covering up some of the rougher details. Alcinous replies, "Only one of the things my daughter did was not correct. She should have brought you here herself, escorted by her slave girls, instead of leaving him kind of in the grove," which, if you remember from last episode, Nausicaa had sort of asked Odysseus to wait in the grove because Nausicaa was worried that, well, what she said was she was worried that um, the sailors would gossip about her and she would look bad.
Yeah.
But what Odysseus says here is, "Your daughter was quite wonderful. Don't blame her. She told me to come with her, but I was too embarrassed. I thought you might get annoyed at seeing me because humans can be very suspicious." So he sort of takes that on himself.
Yeah.
Um, and the king sort of, I think, on some level realizes the game that Odysseus is playing here of trying to keep things warm and friendly. And the king says, "My heart is not the type to feel anger for no good reason. Moderation is always best. Athena, Zeus, and Apollo, what a congenial man you are. I wish you would stay here and marry my daughter." So again, the sort of Odysseus Nausicaa connection is being suggested.
Hmm.
Um, and Alcinous sort of says, "I'd give you home and wealth if you would stay, but if not, we will not keep you here against your will. No problem. May Zeus have it be as you wish. I give you my word, you can go home tomorrow. Please go ahead and go to sleep, and you will be rowed across the peaceful sea until you reach your landed home wherever you want to go, even as beyond Euboea, which in their opinion is the farthest away you can go." So he says their sailors had previously gone to Euboea and had gone there and back in a day without even getting tired. So Alcinous is sort of bragging up the sailors here. And Odysseus is so happy at this response that he prays, "Oh, Father Zeus, may everything come true just as he has said. May his fame burn bright forever, and may I reach my home." And at that discussion, everybody seems happy. Arete calls the servants to lay out a bed on the porch for Odysseus. They describe fine purple blankets spread with covers and woolly quilts. And with torches, they bustle out and they set it all up and they call Odysseus, "Come outside, your bed is ready." Odysseus was glad to go to sleep. He goes to sleep on the bed, and Alcinous goes to sleep in his room with his wife, who made their bed and shared it. So that's the end of book seven. And we have Odysseus finally um, welcomed and promised a journey home without any kind of um, trouble. So,
Yeah, yeah. And ironically in like sort of Poseidon's people, the people of the god that hates him and that has been, throwing him all around the Mediterranean Sea so that he can't get home, causing him all those pains and sufferings that with which he identifies himself to other people and as
yeah,
sort of mortal man. But I don't
it's
know.
fascinating to me, the
Yeah.
Poseidon piece, because you would think, I would think if Poseidon was that mad at Odysseus and Poseidon was that close with the Phaeacian people, there would be some form of communication of like, don't help this guy. This guy's bad news.
Yeah.
Or they would give some offerings to Poseidon and convince him to, put aside his wrath and not cause any problems. But nothing happens if the summaries I have read are correct, which I assume they are. They put him on the boat. He goes home. The boat comes back, and Poseidon's so mad that they helped Odysseus get home that he turns the boat into a giant stone at the opening to the harbor, and either they don't have any boats anymore, or their harbor is blocked. But in any case, this sort of magical land of the Phaeacians is therefore sort of no longer in contact with the rest of the human. They're sort of kicked out of the general um, Mediterranean sort of civilization.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so they're punished pretty badly for being good hosts, for being like, and in a certain way, you could say, although certainly not intentional, but like Odysseus brought them bad luck and
Yeah.
helping him the way they were supposed to. Like the curse of Odysseus, the curse Poseidon put on Odysseus for killing uh, Polyphemus, the Cyclops, um, was eventually settled upon the Phaeacians here, which is not
Uh,
good. Like I don't support that as a as a moral of the story, but what can you say? You know?
yeah. I mean, but those gods, they're like humans, right? They're very fickle. They need to be obeyed at all costs. Yeah, I didn't make that connection until you said it, that the curse that Odysseus got for hurting Poseidon's son Polyphemus, the Cyclops, by blinding him, uh, was put on these people now who are also sort of Poseidon's people and also identified with giants, right? Like they're
Mm.
descended from giants. And also they mention giants later on. Alcinous does, I think, when he's talking about how the gods used to come here as themselves and not disguised. But are you a god? That kind of thing. And he
Yeah.
mentions giants along with those. Like,
Yeah, and the Cyclops, the cyclopic people
yeah,
specifically as well, So
yeah,
yeah, yeah, they do seem to be sort of this semi-upper human kind of. I mean, yeah, I guess you had a lot of that in Greek mythology, so it wasn't that unusual, but they do seem to be sort of tied into the divine realms quite well
yeah,
until Odysseus comes there. And
yeah,
maybe they are, maybe it's sort of they're continued to be taken care of by Poseidon, but they're cut off from the rest of civilization, so you can't find them anymore. It's sort of
yeah,
a
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that does kind of hurt their identity as these like people with like the best ships and the best sailors. She even Athena, I think, had mentioned to Odysseus when they're going into the town, these people are not like bowmen or something like that, something terrestrial she identifies most maybe Greeks with. These people are ship people. And
Hmm.
they go, later on they say how they can go to this really far destination and back in one day. It's like that's their identity. And when he goes into the town, he marvels at their ship making and also their ramparts, which sort of block the other people from the seas, kind of coming to them and raiding them. Um, and interestingly, the history of these people, the uh, King Alcinous's people, Scherians, or um, they had originally been somewhere else and they had escaped from that place, and so that emphasizes this location as kind of this haven away from sort of the turmoil and the war of the rest of the world, the rest of the Greek world and everything. And it's interesting
Yeah.
that Odysseus, trying to escape the war and go back home, comes to this place. And so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember something that the Sharia and Ogygia were described as like far away from everything else. And I think somewhere there's I think I was reading, I'm trying to make sense of it on like Wikipedia or something, and I think there was a mention that there's a theory that they were actually out in the Atlantic. And
Oh,
that
wow.
even that maybe so far as to say the Phaeacians may have been the Atlanteans. That seems a more not
A little
firmly
far-fetched.
supported
Yeah.
theory, but um it there's something similar about like them being that far removed from the Mediterranean culture and kind of
Right.
being off. I mean, Atlas's daughter, if Calypso is Atlas's daughter, Atlas is at the far ends of the earth holding up the sky over there. So, and if he's within sailing distance of Ogygia, and Ogygia is related to Atlas and the Atlantic and all that, maybe. I mean, it's not clear from the text exactly. It's clearly not stated out in the text, so we can kind of
Mm.
hypothesize how we want.
Yeah.
Um,
But either way, they are kind of removed. They're kind of this haven
yeah, and
from.
and they have these immortal dog statues that sound kind of like robots. I mean, they're going around, they're guarding. They don't die. They're safeguarding the house. They're made of gold and silver. They're made by the god Hephaestus. So lots of gods have blessed. They mention uh, libations to Zeus and Hermes. They mention Athena blessing the women. They mention Hephaestus giving them gifts. Poseidon is kind of their protector. And Apollo's involved somehow, although he kills off the king's brother. But they're all very engaged. Like the gods are very engaged with these
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's just kind of interesting. And there's the fact that their gardens grow year round, and that's marked as unusual. You know,
Yeah.
um, I don't know if the Mediterranean seems like it's pretty warm all year round anyway, compared to some of the more northern climates, but um, still, it's marked as like unusual that the fruits don't ever wither in the winters.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I noted that too. There is this sort of just, and I think they feast all year round. And yeah, there's this sort of eternal quality to it. This place does seem kind of like heaven to me. The springs that there's two springs that feed those gardens, and there's just this kind of Eden-like quality to this whole place.
yeah, yeah, it's very very Eden-like, and it says somewhere that they're feasting all the time because they don't have any wants, they don't have any needs, like they don't all their needs are met or something like that. There's
Right. Yeah.
phrasing to that extent. Um, so yeah, it's pretty nice place if you can find it, but apparently it's been uh since they helped Odysseus, it's been blocked away, and now we don't have that magic anymore.
Yeah, I mean a little bit like Eden there. Maybe there's an older pattern in mythology of this. There's a play. There's a. I mean, it's kind of like Utopia, right? And yeah, like Utopia, which means no place. You can't really reach it, but it's maybe
Hmm.
it's just something that people who have experienced all sorts of vicissitudes of life sort of will imaginatively invent to kind of fantasize about in a story.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely something deeply mythological about like the lost paradise. And I think there's something to it of like we
You
know
think
when
it?
things are bad,
Hmm,
and we have a when we hear of a place like this, there's a longing for it. There's a like, oh, like that feels right. And I
hmm.
think if nothing else, the fact that we have a sense of that being possible and sort of trying to imagine how that might be possible, that would give rise to a lot of these things.
Mm,
It's also arguable that these are ways of making sense of sort of the felt memory of being in the womb.
mm,
I mean, talk about you're held, all of your needs are met. You don't have to do anything. It's warm, it's comfortable, um, and you can just exist, and everything is taken care of for you. Like that's what it's like for 9 months. That's our first experience of being alive to the extent that there's an experience.
mm.
Um, so it could be sort of a harkening back to like early, not like cognitive memories, but early, like, felt memories, emotional memories, physical sort of in the body memories.
Yeah. Yeah, and there is a strong water element to this
Hmm.
place, just like being in the womb. I mean, this place is all about water.
That's
Um,
true. That's true.
even the
Poseidon and
the
the ships and
palace. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I think Nausicaa describes when she's or when she's leading them or something. I remember there being a discussion in the earlier chapter about like they come to the causeway where all the boats are lined, and then up ahead of them is the palace. And that is sort of a uterine metaphor. You've got the
Hmm.
vaginal pathway, this sort of narrow pathway, and then the sort of safe space
Hmm.
that's protected, sort of
Hmm.
at the distance, surrounded by water. So there is this idea of being surrounded by water and being sort of held in a removed place.
Hmm.
Yeah, I hadn't. That's cool. Yeah, I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like how these things pop up in the in the discussion.
Yeah. I mean, another thing I was thinking sort of like that is just maybe there's something about the lost paradise that has something to do with the memory of the innocence of childhood as
Mm.
adults. There's something appealing to that. You remember a time if your childhood was sort of decent, um, where yeah, you didn't have the needs, the sufferings that Odysseus sort of identifies as the sort of what he is heir to, what flesh is heir to use a little bit of a Shakespeare line. And yeah, maybe all peoples have this idea of this sort of, you'd like to return back to that. And then yeah, maybe there's this sort of cyclical view of life and a sort of heaven or at least a peace after death that can come that this sort of Edenic place represents.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It gets placed in different, excuse me, different timelines. But yeah, there's definitely a longing for that. I know I feel that myself.
Excuse me.
Bless
Thanks.
you. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I already kind of touched on in the telling of it, the sort of weird relationship between the king and the queen. I don't
Yeah.
know what to make of that. Um, maybe there's I don't know. I mean, the tendency to marry between siblings or cousins or whatever in royal families, certainly
Yeah.
long-standing European tradition. So
Yeah.
no reason to assume it would have been different.
Yeah, I heard that. I mean, I think that happened a lot in ancient Egypt and probably many
Mm,
families is yeah, because marrying among royals, if you're married, you're spreading, you're making a strong political connection. So keeping it in the family would be in your interest in some way. You're taking less risk by making a connection that might be a liability later on. Um,
yeah.
and specifically with this, I noticed that Queen Arete, being her husband's niece, it says that he honored her when he married her, he honored her above all women. So I thought maybe there's some dishonor that had happened to her because of what had happened to her father. Like he was killed by Apollo, the god of truth. Is this
Mm,
maybe this idea that he had done something terrible, at least in the eyes of the god, and these people who
mm,
are so close to the gods, that especially would have meant a lot to them. Of course, it would mean a lot to anybody, like sort of how you are held in the favor or disfavor of a god. It's can be viewed as sort of like how reality views you or how nature views you, or at least how something very powerful, amorphous, and fickle sort of is looking at you. That's going to
Mhm.
determine a lot about your life.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You never know what's going to happen. Yeah, and yeah, I don't know that makes sense to me, or on some level, I like it anyway. That it's some sort of a redemptive move um, on the part of the king to sort of raise his niece up in that way, so she's not just dishonored and discarded.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know, but
I
they
thought,
have kids and they share a bed. That's spelled out. That's
yeah,
spelled out pretty clearly. So
yeah,
I'm a little, genetics. Okay, not my concern. They're doing their thing.
yeah.
As long as everybody's happy, I suppose it's fine. But
I mean, she seems like she's doing well. It's interesting that she's described as like a particularly good woman. She has this ability to kind of be a peacemaker. She can so she's walks through town and she's on just like her husband has honored her. She's honored by everybody else. She's loved by her people. She's valued
mhm.
by them, and she can make peace between quarreling individuals, which I thought is interesting. I wonder if there's some deeper connection between her father being killed by Apollo and her being honored by Alcinous, the king, and now she can kind of make peace. So not everything is always good in Eden, but with her help, it's like 99% there, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. And that, like, especially like you're saying, Apollo, the god of truth, the father doing something to anger the god of truth, but then her being able to kind of find the truth of the situation to a degree where the dispute is dissolved instead of leaving wounds or need requiring one party to be killed, like her
Yeah,
father was. There is kind of a
right.
balancing there, you know?
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's funny you mentioned balancing because that's how her husband describes himself later. He's very moderate. He's balancing. When they had mentioned maybe the possibility that Odysseus is possibly a god, and then Odysseus corrects them. You know, that's it shows his character. Like he can be wily and kind of lie, or present himself in certain ways, but he is very clear that I am immortal. I am not a god. And that's I think a lot of the larger theme of this, like you mentioned in his sort of sex prisonage with with Calypso. She
Sex
was
slave of a
very
goddess.
hospitable.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Sex slave of a goddess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, however terrible that would have been, for sure. I mean, he certainly suffered a lot, but there's worse things, I
Mhm.
think. But yeah, he oh, I forget, I kind of forget my point. What was I saying about King Alcinous and
Sort of balancedness and Odysseus being insisting that he was human.
Right,
Um,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
there's just so much there I think about him sort of being very very human. I mean, and that's how the Odyssey starts as opposed to Iliad. Iliad is like rage, the rage of Achilles. This is like man, the humanness of Odysseus. And here again, he's saying, "No, no, no, I'm not a god. I'm a long-suffering human being. I need your help. I've gone in the ashes. I've supplicated myself to you. I've humbled myself to you,"
Mhm.
which interestingly Athena had described as a act of bravery. So he's like he has to be brave by going in and supplicating himself to the queen. So
Yeah, that is interesting. The act of bravery, the act of falling to your knees and asking for help as an act of bravery. That is, which it is. It's hard
yeah,
to do, and you have to be able to be strong enough in your personality to overcome this sort of tendency to not the weakness of not being able to ask for help. But
yeah,
to have that described as a brave act by Athena, that's actually pretty insightful in a culture that, in a story arc that's coming from the rage of Achilles and the Menelaus losing his wife and the Trojan War and the basically like the Holocaust against the Trojans, like they're all wiped out, you know. It's really interesting. I feel like there's something to this of like Odysseus preferring to come home,
Yeah.
Odysseus
Yeah.
refusing divine spousehood, Odysseus insisting he's a man. You and I think one of the intros that you sent me, I forget if it's Wilson or Fagles, but somebody talks about the fact that the Odyssey starts out with like, tell me the story of a man.
Yeah.
And it's a man, it's not the man. Like they make that distinction in the introduction. I
Mm.
haven't read that book, so I don't know for sure, but
Hmm.
based on my memory of the introduction.
Yeah.
The focus of the Odyssey is on the humanness of Odysseus and the longing to come home and be a human
Yeah.
and the refusal of godhood, which
Yeah.
is, not, I've not heard it discussed that way, but brings to mind immediately for me, like the sort of Buddhist middle way, the sort of in the Buddhist cosmology, you'll have like the hell realms and the heaven realms, and the human realms are kind of in the middle, and that's where enlightenment can happen. That's why human birth is so noble, human birth, and it's so rare, and it's such a gift to be born a human. You're if you're searching for enlightenment and fulfillment and truth and dharma and all that stuff, you're better off being born a human than you are being born in the god realms, because the god realms will eventually, you'll fall from them. As beautiful as they are, something will happen and you'll fall back into suffering. And the only place that you're actually free is in the human realms. You can actually find freedom, enlightenment, freedom from suffering in the human realms. You can't find it in the god realms.
Wow.
And if Odysseus is a man who insists that he is a man and he wants to go home and he wants to see his homeland and he wants to be under his house with his wife and his slaves and his son and his lands, and he wants to be sort of where he is. He wants to be himself as the ultimate goal. Uh, is fascinating because, um, well, I don't know. I don't want to talk too much. If you have something to say, go ahead. This also feeds into some stuff with the Iliad and with Achilles that I read somewhere recently, so I can talk about that in a minute, but I don't want to overdo it.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I can interject a bit, but yeah, please keep going after that. But yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking. That's why I sort of brought up Calypso too, is that, you'd pointed out he had a chance to become a god with a goddess. I mean, that's a pretty good deal, and she gave him a really long time to think about it, and he stayed steadfast. That almost reminds me of sort of meditation too, and the Buddha of like staying concentrated on what you're really trying to do here, not getting carried away with all this temptation and everything. Before enlightenment, the myth goes that he was tempted by many beautiful kinds of things, right? And he put his finger on the ground and he maintained his concentration. And
Yeah,
that there's
Mara and
a
the daughters of Mara and his armies was attacked the Buddha, but they were all illusory. And
yeah.
his reply to Mara was like to put his hand on the ground, like you're saying, and that is the same message that we get from Odysseus, at least as we're looking at it here. I don't mean to imply massive, oh, it's the same story, but like
Yeah, yeah,
it's the same ingredient in different stories.
yeah,
And they're both very important, I think. Yeah.
yeah. And that, yeah, Odysseus has had this terrible suffering in this war, and now he's trying to come home. And then he goes into a paradise with Calypso, a beautiful goddess, and the story shows that she's more beautiful than his wife, and he admits that and everything.
Mm,
And he's saying, "Still, I want to go back." Yeah, and then yeah, I don't know. There's something attractive about the Greeks, maybe because in some way, they fully embrace being human,
hmm
and they acknowledge that there is a godhood to us. And I think this is important for humans to know too. There is an immanence to us. We are very much flesh and blood, heir to all the sufferings of the world, and we will die. You know, but at the same time, there is a there is a sort of transcendence element to us too. And that's interesting what you said about the Buddhist sort of cosmology that really, in a way, if you want to be the best a being can be, you should be a human. And that
Mhm.
reminded me of what Rousseau says about virtue. And he says God cannot be virtuous because virtue means strength. It's like this thing you have to attain. It's not something that you can just have with just sort of with your natural being. You have to actually work for it. So
Mm.
putting Jesus aside, maybe he was God and human, but yeah.
Right.
But anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I have to say about
Okay. Okay.
that. Just
Yeah. I was just agreeing
like
with
that.
you. I wasn't trying to interrupt, but if you're done, yeah. 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 No. Um. Sort of made in his image. I'm thinking, from the Bible where humanity is made in God's image. What does that even fucking mean? Um. And the sort of I remember reading somewhere the idea that the sort of virtues that we are told to aspire to in the Christian tradition, charity and uh, chastity and all these things, that those originally were considered signs of the spirit or something, fruit of the spirit, something like that. But the idea being that like through practice, you would develop these virtues and they would be a sign that you were, by your fruits, by their fruits, you will know them. That would be a sign that you were devout, that you had practiced, you had dedicated things, you had sort of clarified yourself in that way. And rather than, I think the way we think of them nowadays is like, oh, these are standards we're just supposed to live by. We're supposed to have them innately, and then we don't, and then we feel like we're sinners and we failed because we're not charity and we're charitable enough. We're
Yeah.
not virtuous enough when the idea was we are born in a state of needing to cultivate these fruits, and as we cultivate ourselves, then they will naturally appear. And their appearance, our attainment to them, is something that we actually need to work for. That doesn't come naturally to us, or at least they're inherent in us, but we have to give expression to them. We have to find out how to do that. Um, yeah. So there's that. But what I will say is to kind of go back to what I was touching on before that. The Iliad starts with the rage of Achilles, like you said. And one of the interesting things about Achilles that I didn't realize until I was looking into all this stuff is Achilles is the son of a water nymph. So he's half divine and half human. And the water nymph, forgive me, I forget her name, but Achilles' mother, there was a prophecy that her son would outdo his father. So that was prophecy that was known to be true, the way prophecies are worked in Greece. And I think both Zeus and Poseidon were lusting after this water nymph, but they realized, Zeus in particular realized that if he were to abduct her, if they were to have sex or he were to rape her, however that was going to work, that it was very likely she would give birth to a son who would kill Zeus the way Zeus killed Kronos, the way Kronos killed Uranus. Like, so it would have continued the death of the father god and the usurpation by the younger son.
Yeah.
And so he arranged for this nymph to be married to this human guy instead. And I think I just read something on this somewhere online. I wish I could find it. I want to say it's Sophie Strand on her Substack. Check it out, please. She does great work. She's doing this whole romantic animist spiritual kind of stuff on her. I think it's great. Um, just a plug for that. But um, so you have Zeus sort of enacting his, and I think he promises to this human prince that this nymph is his, and so the nymph go or the prince goes and like rapes the nymph, and she's pregnant, and like so this is Zeus's way of being like, I still got to have my way with this woman without getting in trouble. I still got to have it go the way I wanted it to. And that the spirit of Achilles that's born, there's a bit of like destiny woven through him of like he was supposed to be the son of Zeus, or he was supposed to like there's some sort of element of where Achilles was supposed to become a god and overthrow and sort of be the next. So there's this sort of thwarted succession energy. Um, and if you're talking about the Iliad as um, the story of the Greeks, and it starts with the rage of Achilles. It starts with the rage of a man who wants to be a god but was denied that, or something like that.
Mm,
And we have that rage of the loss of divinity, or the realization that we are not divine, or the realization that we are human, or that with Achilles we have a weakness. Achilles has the legendary heel. That he's not immortal. He's in danger. He's in danger of death. He's rageful, and because of that, like the whole Trojan War, it doesn't start, but like that's where the story of it begins, with the rage of a man who could have been a god but wasn't.
mm.
And then that creates this whole Holocaust against the Trojans, where they're like, this whole civilization is basically wiped from the earth. And if you follow Western tradition, then the last Trojan, Aeneas, I'm saying that correctly, goes and founds Rome. So there you have the trauma of a holocausted people going somewhere else and starting what becomes a massive empire that goes out and colonizes all of, so much of the rest of the world in a rather traumatic way. Um, but to kind of go back, you have that all of that happen, and then at the end of that, you have Odysseus, who is he just wants to go home. He doesn't want to be a god anymore. He's done. He meets you mentioned something last time. He meets the spirit of Achilles, and Achilles is like, I wish I'd just been a farmer. And
Yeah.
Odysseus is showing, I don't want to be a god. I don't want to be no renowned. I don't want to be a hero in the Greek sense, where the heroes were almost godlike. They were raised, they had shrines to Hercules, they had shrines to, Theseus. So the heroes became godlike humans. And Odysseus is like, I don't want any of that. And Achilles is like, I wish I'd just been a farmer. And
Yeah.
Odysseus just wants to go home, reclaim his home, and be a human. And I think maybe that's the myth that's at the core of our culture that I don't hear talked about enough. I don't know. I see the pattern, but I don't know that I've heard it spelled out in that way, of accepting our humanity and finding joy in it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Whew.
that was a great way to kind of draw that out, that sort of tension between godhood and our human nature, and how that shows in the different myths. And I was thinking of that too, the contrast, excuse me, between Odysseus and Achilles, specifically, that later in the story in the Odyssey, he meets Achilles, and Achilles had the choice to live a short, glorious life, which is a very big deal for any warrior culture, including the Greeks, or to live a longer life, and he chose a shorter life. But then later, when Odysseus meets his spirit in the underworld, he says, "I wish I'd taken the other option." But Odysseus
Mm-hmm.
never has that. He ends up going back home. He has to kind of clean house, uh, and sort of establish his place again, sort of in his kingdom. And but but being a human, and he never seems to sort of regret. He's like he's good with all that.
Does
And
he? Oh, he must actually. So he must have that conversation with Achilles before he gets shipwrecked with Calypso for 7 years.
I don't remember the specific order, because
Well, it
so
must be because it's Calypso, then it's the Phaeacians, and then it's home. So
well
anything
so
that happens that he
mm.
talks about would happen before, chronologically, not. I know the story bounces around all over the place, but
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, the story, so yeah, it starts with Telemachus, and then Odysseus's story starts in book 5 with Calypso. But yeah, stuff had happened before that. It starts in media res, I think that's what it's called, like when you start a story in the middle, and
Mhm.
then you kind of go, maybe go backward and then go forward to the present, and then you have the ending.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think that's the sort of,
yeah,
it's not told in the same order that the story of Odysseus happens.
yeah. So but looking at that with the story of Odysseus, he has this conversation with Achilles, where he has this conversation with someone who made the choice for the short and glorious life.
Yeah.
And his response, what he learns from that interaction is, geez, I wish I'd just been a farmer. And he receives that information from the dead. He receives that, like, longing from the dead, and that sort of carries him through his journey home, and may even be, maybe may have contributed to his lack of desire to stay with Calypso, because whether you're have this short flash of glory or you become a god by marrying a goddess, like both of those are removing yourself from the like human farmer, common, at home, just being him, whether you're the king of Ithaca or you're a farmer, like you're still just being the human that you are. And it's
Yeah.
kind of a return and an acceptance of our humanity. And
Yeah.
Achilles is warning him. And what you're telling me, Achilles is warning him, like, I wish I hadn't gone for glory. I wish I had stayed human. And then we see Odysseus make that choice.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, that helps him to kind of solidify maybe his determination. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
kind of proof that like the path of being truly human is despite all the terrible suffering is the way to go.
Which, as is repeatedly told to Odysseus, he must bear. He must just bear up under the suffering,
Yeah.
you know? And that's
Yeah,
what it
we
means to be human. Yeah.
yeah, we talked about that in the last episode where Nausicaa had told him that, she kind of authenticates him or validates his sufferings and then says, and so you must bear them,
Hmm.
It's kind of like that's the only thing that you can do. I mean, and then he does end up going to her parents and almost I think of it like a confession or a confiding in. He tells them his story,
Hmm.
and there is a sort of glory in that. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned in our culture we have maybe a hard time kind of exalting the human being, or um, yeah, I think that's a strain in our culture for a long time. It's like because it's tricky. You do have to balance it, right? Because we do participate in the divine in some way, but we're also very flesh and blood, human, animal. You know, there's just it's a very complex thing.
Hmm.
I think that's some of the culture wars too, like with say about Darwinian evolution. To some people don't want to accept it. I think because they can see that it can't people can use that to say we're just animals. It's sort of like
Hmm.
life is meaningless, like the Dawkins kind of meme, kind of idea that there's we're just the playthings of genetics and evolution. It's sort of life. You can kind of see life as purposeless, and certainly it's an attack on a lot of the traditional ideas of beauty, goodness, truth, meaning in life, Christian God or whatever. So yeah, it is a complex kind of balance. I think we often it's hard to balance. I think sometimes we in our culture now we sometimes go too far on the imminent side or imminent side, whatever, the non-transcendent side of just
Hmm.
life is meaningless, and I think that shows up in some of our cynicism and sort of our difficulty kind of, I don't know, seeing grace or goodness in humans, and oftentimes there's this we sympathize with the sufferings a lot, but we don't have this sort of the godlike nature of us in mind too. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I feel like when we were just sort of entering into this part of the dialogue, I was thinking of our modern culture as being sort of unwilling to bear the suffering the way Odysseus is encouraged to bear the suffering. We were
yeah,
talking a little bit, I don't know if it came up in the podcast, but I know part of our planning had been about like the aesthetics of the smooth, for the
right.
podcast on beauty, and just sort of the way we want everything to be easy and not have any friction and just kind of have no trouble. That seems to be wanting to be human, as you're saying, the immanence or whatever. I don't know the word either. So the sort of anti-transcendence, just being human, ignoring the godhood, but then also ignoring the fact that part of being human is to suffer and to bear up under that suffering and to continue on to try and find our true home, the way Odysseus sort of points us to. Um, we don't kind of want to do either of those things. We don't want to have a God that we're relating to, and we don't want to be human. And I mean, I guess it's hard to be human and bear up under suffering if you think there's no God, there's no salvation. It's just shitty suffering, or you ignore the shitty suffering.
Yeah, I
You
think
know, so
that's some key to it.
yeah, yeah, that makes me sad. That's rough. Um, yeah, but that's why I like the Christ story so much. Is you have the story of bearing the cross. I mean, talk about bearing the cross until you're crucified on it, and then you rise. Then you're resurrected. You rise again.
Yeah,
Um, I think that's you know you could say Odysseus is very Christ-like. He bears the cross of loss of homeland while longing for home until finally he's washed up naked on the shores of the Phaeacian lands, and then finally is brought home and is able to tell his story, relate all the trauma he's carrying, he's able to get it out of himself, and then he's whisked home on his magical ship.
yeah,
It's the easiest journey he's made the entire Odyssey is like how he finally gets home. It's just like that, no problem, as described in this chapter.
yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
what you mentioned about our sort of aesthetics of the smooth, how we don't want to accept our sufferings, and maybe I think that is related to our sort of we don't have a good purpose for or a good worldview that helps us to give meaning to that suffering. Like, I think we tend to go for just sort of instrumental reasonings, like you need this for success, or maybe sort of a stoic thing. But yeah, yeah, we don't have a good worldview for like why we should suffer. What is
Mhm.
Odysseus's kind of worldview? I think I mean, they have a rich worldview. Everything, I mean, they believe gods are everywhere, gods control everything. So there
It
is a
seems,
sort of
yeah, I mean, I don't know.
a lot of
I
it's
don't know that I have much to
Penelope. I
say, but
mean,
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't thought of this that much. A lot of it's Penelope, right? He wants to get back to his wife, and she's shown to be very kind of virtuous. Obviously, she's kind of a paragon of like wifehood, kind of waiting 20 years for him, which is sort of like a crazy amount of time. And not sure that he's alive. I mean, if the war ended 10 years ago and your husband's still not here and none of his companions have come home, I mean, it's likely that he's dead, and he's almost certainly dead. So, but she's interesting little detail. There's a parallel with her and the women Phaeacians too, where it describes them as having very good minds and also very good weavers. And like Athena gave them that gift, and Athena, the goddess of wisdom, so connected to Penelope's husband Odysseus, and back home in Ithaca, with the suitors kind of eating up the house and home of Odysseus and his family, his wife is holding them off from their offers of marriage with her weaving every night. And she's weaving every night, unravels it every day. So it's like, well, I'm not done with it yet. Got to keep weaving tonight. So I can't marry anybody. So she keeps doing that. And that's her sort of good mind kind of at play. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that. That's really interesting. Um, the weaving of story, the trying to complete something, the trying to bring it together, but not, and choosing not to because it's not the right time because the Lord isn't home. Well, the ruler of
yeah,
the house. Yeah. Um, yeah, and one thing I was thinking was, earlier you were asking like what does what's Odysseus's reasoning for all of the suffering. He says repeatedly, at least in the two chapters I've read, that like he longs to see the smoke rising over his homeland. He just wants to be home, once before he dies. It's not even like,
Yeah.
there's just this longing for a right being in the right place, a rightness of place. And then, I think Nausicaa spells it out pretty well of like, well, the gods have chosen to give you suffering, and you're the human, you must bear it. That's, I think that seems to be as far as they had sort of, as far as the reasons why we suffer or why we should suffer, that seems to be, because it's the God's will that they have given us these fates or whatever. They have cursed us or blessed us in this way, and it's just what we must undertake. Um, which is a little sad in that like it leaves you less likely to question and try and understand. But it is very freeing in that it's
Yeah.
different from the Christian worldview of, oh, because we've done something wrong. We're suffering because we're inherently sinful and bad. Like that seems I'd rather live in a society that tells me, well, the gods make us suffer than a society that says the gods make us suffer because we're terrible people and we fucked up a long ass time ago and we're still paying for it. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess ideally I would like well, we're suffering because of things that happened a long ass time ago, and it's our job to kind of do our best to make them right with the sort of eventual idea that maybe things will be good, but maybe not. I almost feel like if I were to write my own version of this myth, I would say that our suffering is meant to help maintain the universe. It's like our way of offering something, doing the Odysseus thing, longing for home, trying to find home, bearing up under the suffering. Um, there is a way that fulfills a purpose. Um, Not that seeking out suffering would be better. I think that's
Mm.
kind of silly, but
Yeah.
when something happens, doing the best you can with it, accepting it, not trying to change it, not trying to run away from it, trying to realize this is the thing for me to figure out. Um, this is like meaning with Odysseus, how do I get home? I'm going to keep trying to get home, whatever it is. And then when you get there, you find out you have to kill all these guys that have been after your wife. Um, but that's a whole different thing. Before we get if you have anything else to say, it would be great. But before it gets too late, I'd love to get into the Xenia element as
Yeah.
well. So,
Yeah, I think we should. I agree with what you said. We have to kind of find some sort of way to make meaning of our suffering, and something is in fully embracing it. And there is a kind of glory, I think, in that. Uh,
mhm. Yeah.
okay, but yeah, so the Xenia thing, so very big um concept in Greek culture, and something that's a very big part of the Odyssey too. So Xenia, Zeina, translates to hospitality and friendship, and it was guarded by Zeus himself. This is the word we get xenophobia and xenophilia from. And yeah, it was just this sort of there was a pattern to it. So when someone from abroad came to your household, you are to welcome them, you're to wash them, give them an honorable and comfortable place to sit, offer them food and wine, and only after he has eaten and had some wine, he's asked to tell his story. And then they're given lodging. And when it's time to leave, the host provides gifts and some practical help with the journey onward. That practical help was called Pompe, Pompe. That means sending in Greek. And yeah, so that was kind of the pattern of Xenia. And yeah, we see it in all through the Odyssey. A lot of it, as Emily Wilson analyzes it, is like sort of perversions of Xenia, sort of like half Xenia, like with Calypso. She offers him all the components of Xenia except the sending off. It's just like it's a guest friendshipness that just s- keeps going on and on and on and on, and she wants it to turn into something else. And then, one of the biggest things is you offer the guest food. And many of the other sort of places that Odysseus and his men land on, his men are eaten. Instead of being given food, they are made food. Uh, so yeah, and so it's not just so it's an interesting kind of thing. In all cultures, there's this sort of hospitality component, but among the Greeks, it seems particularly important and had a political dimension where after this guest friendship between the guest and the host is established, the future generations of those households then have a special kind of relationship, and that helped to the Greek culture to kind of expand and kind of made the world safer for Greek travelers. So especially in a time without maybe money even, and without without the ease of transportation that we have now. It's like you needed a way to go from place to place, and this was kind of the cultural practice that allowed that.
Yeah, if you would show up as a stranger in a land with, as you're traveling, you can't bring a farm and a herd with you,
Yeah.
so you come to a place where people have all the farms and all the herds and everything, and they owned by people. You need to be able to have a way of saying, hey, can you take care of me? Can I come through your land? Can we value the fact that I can travel for whatever purpose I need to travel, and you will support that, as opposed to all of a sudden I'm a stranger and we're at war.
Yeah.
So I feel like one of the key elements of Xenia being um, a step above. I mean, if you look at the vast thing of human history, like, you had tribal groups and you had outsiders, and every tribal group saw the other tribal groups as outsiders. And this is I don't want to say this is one of the first cases, but this is a case of creating a social structure where when you meet an outsider, it is deemed best to support them rather than attack them,
Yeah.
according to these certain rituals that you're outlining. And if both people, the host and the guest, both groups, enact their roles properly, the host welcomes the guest and feeds them and supports them and asks to hear their story. So the guest is able to kind of realize they're welcome. So their fight or flight doesn't go off. They're like, okay, I'm welcome here. Oh, you want to hear my story? I'll tell my story. There's an exchange of information, which is important for a growing civilization. You need to know what the other people are doing. They're suddenly no longer a stranger. They're suddenly somebody who you know. There's a bond of at least friendliness, if not friendship.
Mm.
Um, I think the guest is supposed to provide some kind of gift to the host as well. She mentions that somewhere.
Yeah.
Now, if
Yeah.
you're traveling, you're maybe not very wealthy, but you provide something for them.
Mm.
In the very least, we see Odysseus crafting stories around Nausicaa's goodness and talking up and sort of giving the warmth back to the family, and you know, um, complimenting the wife, the king, and the queen, and he gives what he can from his words, and he creates a convivial vibe there.
Mm.
And then at the end, giving them something to help them go on their way, both encourages the travel so that people are able to continue to the next big city state where they might get welcomed by somebody else, but it also ensures that people don't overstay their welcome. And so you can be like, okay, I can support, I can I have my household. I can support like 5 wandering guests this year. I have enough extra food and stuff that I know I can do that. And so you're like, all right, you come in, here's your parcel. I'll take your story. Here's your, going away aid. Now get out of here. I don't, you're not going to be hanging on my household. I don't have to take care of you. Like, you can come and you can go. And it's almost you want to talk about like a cellular system or a molecular system of information moving, chemicals moving through the body, gates where they're stopped, they give off what they need, they carry on. The blood moves through, picks up oxygens in the lungs, goes to the heart, gets pumped to the body, exchanges at each stage a little bit of oxygen for a little bit of carbon dioxide, begins to turn blue, gets tired, goes back home to the lungs, gets supported again, goes back out. Like, these are how healthy cycles happen. Points of exchange that don't stop the journey. Strangers who are welcomed and then sent on their way. It's creating a circulatory system of culture. And I think the Greeks the Greek civilization did well by that. They had colonies all over the place, but I can imagine if you show up as a Greek colonist and you show up and you carry these values with you, you will be much more welcomed in the new land than you would be if you come as a conqueror. You sort of respect the land that you come into. You respect them as the hosts. You set up a space. You begin trading with them. There's already this, oh, well, you're strangers, but we can get along well because of our rules of Xenia. Um, so the Greek culture had this like welcoming of the other built into it, and they were able to spread as they did. Um, Up until Alexander, maybe. I don't know. I mean, Athens supposedly went to war. I'm not saying it was a perfect culture, but I'm saying it had some internal structure to it that encouraged friendliness over warfare.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
and I think that's powerful. And I wonder, talk about some of the other colonization efforts by, the later Romans and the Europeans and here in the States, when the British came over, like if we had been more xenial with the Native Americans, where would our culture be? What kind of different situation would we be in if there had been more of a wedding between those two cultures as opposed to the sort of one trying to triumph and convert the other.
Mm.
Um, so that was just one of the things I feel really stood out to me in the Xenia a little introduction is like it's a delicate dance, but when it's done well, everybody kind of benefits. And it's not easy, but as a social value, I can see why it was so important, you know. Um,
Yeah, and they
yeah.
did value it a lot. I mean, it's striking that Zeus was the guardian of that. Like,
Mhm.
nowadays with sort of easy travel and everything, we don't think of it as that dangerous or, getting help is that crucial. We have so many systems kind of built in. But yeah, back then things were extremely different, and you were really at the mercy of the world around you. And yeah, it you needed Zeus to be the guardian of that, or else people could really die on their journeys.
Yeah, yeah. And to have that shared value system of like the king of the gods being the one who's enforcing this.
Yeah.
Um, and I wonder how much our current state that you describe of how easy it is for us nowadays to travel and visit different cultures, and it's fun and everybody kind of enjoys it. I wonder how much of that is due to the thread of Xenia running through Greek culture and the thread of Greek culture running through European culture in general. I
Yeah.
wonder if that really was one of the blessings that came through from the ancestors of our culture that give us the world we have today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because we certainly don't we have that kind of idea. I mean, Odysseus certainly experienced a lot of suffering too, but a lot of that was at the hands of these non proto-human type of things like these giants or something like that. I think giants tend to be in not just the Greek culture, sort of this like representation of an imagined pre-human kind of savage kind of people, the Polyphemus and the other uh what is his group, the sort of
I think they're this Cyclopes. I think that's the
Cyclopes,
the
right? Yeah,
Cyclops.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I noticed they kind of they have a lot of human traits, but they kind of all live alone. Like they have there's not they live on the same island, but they don't like seem to have families. They
Mm,
seem to all like live apart from each other, and
mm,
so they're sort of like half civilized, not they're sort of like not quite human. And he's so savage, he's a cannibal, sort of eating humans. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I remember. I think they make the lightning bolts for Zeus. I think that's what they do. So there's some sort of a relationship to the
that's
gods, some
interesting.
sort of a like lower down divine power as well as sort of proto-human, sort of less than human, but also greater than human at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure how to make sense of that, but I definitely see both elements because they're giants. They eat people. They don't seem to value. I mean, like Emily Wilson says, the so many of Odysseus's trials are failures of Xenia, and the Cyclops is particularly he's eating them. He's not welcoming them. They just throw stones at them and tell them to go away or whatever happens. They get attacked right off the bat, I think. So there's which would have been common in sort of pre-civilized human tribal relations of, oh, there are strangers approaching our land. They must be dangerous. We need to, do something to protect the little bit that's ours.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and I don't want to dive too far into that being true for actual, pre-Greek or hunter-gatherer humans. I'm sure they were a little more complex and elegant than that. But still, when you come across a people who speak a different language, have a different culture, have different values, it's very hard to not have misunderstandings and explosions happen, I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
Um, and having values that encourage something like Xenia would be a way of sort of containing that tendency and calming it, sort of taming it in a
yeah,
in a
yeah,
in a not in a like negative way, but like when you have a wild horse and you gentle it so you can ride it. And it's still lively. It's not like you're not dressing it up in bows and just, putting it in a
yeah.
dress. It's still a
Not
horse. It's a
completely
it's a
unnatural.
beast. Yeah, it's not completely unnatural. It still has its animalistic power, but it's integrated with sort of a way that isn't as destructive. It's,
Yeah,
it's less destructive, and you can see the Cyclops as being much more destructive, clearly.
yeah, yeah.
So.
Yeah, that question of what is natural is really interesting. That's what Rousseau grapples with a lot, and I think he has a lot of puts a lot of his genius towards kind of wrestling with this point, right? Because it's like,
Mm.
especially in modernity, how do we be natural? I think that's a very, very good thing to try to think about. One of the most interesting discussions he has in his book Emile is about inoculations. They didn't have vaccines, but they had inoculations. And it's clear that he believes in its effectiveness. And at the same time, you could easily argue it's not natural, right? So that goes against his philosophy. So he has a complex discussion. I won't reproduce it here, but yeah, these kinds of things, I think, and I think this is a key to maybe being happy, is living in whatever modern world or whatever culture you're in and sticking to nature, but not in this like, trying to live like people 10,000 years ago, or going off and living in the woods by yourself. I mean, some people want to do that, but most of us don't want to. I don't think that's the best thing for most people to do. Um, but yeah, that's a kind of key thing. Um, Getting back to Xenia, did you notice that when in book seven, when Odysseus lands here, Athena makes him invisible because she doesn't want someone to sort of question him, sort of maybe make him uncomfortable. And then she herself welcomes him after Nausicaa has welcomed him in the form of like a little girl with a pitcher. It seems like this is a parallel later on of when he rinses his hands off when they have a pitcher when he's in the
Hmm.
palace when he gets welcomed by the royalty. Um, but it's interesting that he's on this island of these people that live apart from everybody else. They're Poseidon's people. Poseidon hates him, and they're said to be not particularly welcoming. They generally don't like foreigners. And
Hmm.
so, that's maybe partially why he has to be so careful in the way that he approaches these people. He has to, Athena's tells him to go to Arete, the Queen Arete, not the king. And then even after he goes to her and then he goes in the ashes, he's like, I'm at your mercy. I'm just this mortal of flesh and blood. I'm nothing in a way. And then the elder statesman has to remind the king, like, hey, this is our religion, this is our culture. Like, you have to, Zeus says you have to accommodate this guest. And only then the king's like, oh yeah, yeah, right. And then like pushes the his son, his favorite son aside, and then puts Odysseus there, and then does the whole Xenia pattern. But
Mhm.
I just thought it was interesting that they're said to be not a very not a hospitable people.
Yeah.
They after all were pushed out of their homeland. Oh,
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't put that piece together. I just thought it was strange because you're right. Nausicaa mentions it that strangers aren't they're kind of looked down upon. That's her
yeah,
reasoning for him hiding in the grove and not following her into town. And then Athena says the same thing and also hides him so that nothing happens.
yeah,
So there is a sense of a lack of Xenia in the greater population, and maybe it being something sort of more located within sort of the upper class
yeah. I was wondering about that too.
realm,
Yeah.
um, which would, be unfortunate and kind of counter to maybe a lot of my theories of it being an important part of culture. But I guess you also couldn't, like, if you were trying to overcome the sort of native human suspiciousness of others, like, you got to start somewhere in it. You can't just expect everybody to change right away. Like, you got to kind of
Yeah,
work your way through that. I mean, even nowadays, like, you know, neighborhood watch signs exist for a reason. You know,
yeah,
you're a
yeah,
stranger. If you don't belong here, we're keeping our eye on you. Um,
yeah.
so,
And there is something natural to that. You do want to know. I mean, just think about it. You want any organism wants to know what's around them. We need to know that. So,
mhm, mhm.
yeah. But then, yeah, maybe there's a natural suspiciousness. I mean, Jared Diamond talks about this. He spent a lot of his he's I'm sure you know him, Guns, Germs, and
Yeah, I'm familiar
Steel,
with him. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
geographer, UCLA. But he spent a lot of his life in Papua New Guinea, and so he got to see kind of like strong remnants of like a primitive time, and he knew a lot about them before they were quote unquote discovered by the modern world. And he said, like back in the day over there, you have to be careful going to the river to get water because because that was also a border, and if one of the next people, the people on the other side of that border saw you, they'd kill you. They just straight
Mm,
they see you, they chase you, they kill you.
hmm,
Like that's how and that reminds me of how chimpanzees will do the same thing. The male chimpanzees will actually go in a group and patrol their border. And if they find any males from another troop, they will just beat them to death. Like it's
mm,
not like there is no ritual of like feeling them out and are you safe or not? Like, can we, probably trade is something that is a kind of mollifying thing. Like, instead of fighting, like we can use our big brains and like we can actually benefit from someone who's maybe in a different territory, has different natural resources and stuff we can trade. Then we can
mhm.
both be stronger instead of like risking ourselves in battle and maybe creating like a back and forth kind of thing. But anyway, that's all to say,
Yeah,
yeah, this natural suspicion is a real thing.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting how it's like, it goes that far back in our evolutionary history that it's something that we share with, most mammals, if not, I mean, bees do it, fish, like everything's very territorial.
Yeah.
Um, and I wonder where that comes from. If it's like something, because if you go all the way back to like single-celled life or, multicellular, but like small life, like that is the world that you're in. Like something will invade you and take you over because it's blind. It doesn't know. It's just looking for resources. And that kind of activity spirals out further and further, is continued. And there's still like you were talking about the chimpanzees, and I'm like, oh, well, that's the same as like that almost feels like a chemical process. Like I have this boundary, and if something comes into it, it's an immune cell, it's an immune response. We want an immune response. We don't want
Yeah.
strange bacteria coming into our body. There's a certain cohesiveness that needs to happen for life to develop. So there's an in-group and an out-group nature to life as a cell, as maybe even as a molecule. I don't know.
Yeah.
But as a structure, like that's important. But then as we get bigger and bigger, like certain elements of that need to drop away because like as humans, I think we would all prefer to live in a world where we could trust other people. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody wants to have to be suspicious. If we could literally all just choose and then know that everybody would for sure guarantee to abide by the decision, hyper imaginary, like never would actually happen because of all these things. But I don't think anybody would choose a world where we had to be suspicious of other people.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
could guarantee one or the other, why wouldn't you guarantee one where we all get along, everybody has their needs met, nobody's going to kill you for no reason, and you can kind of trust that if somebody shows up and you support them, they're going to support you. I mean, that's Xenia, you know? Xenia
Yeah.
is moving us in that direction.
Yeah.
And it's yeah,
Yeah.
so it's important.
This is a great thing that has developed from our primate kind of origins, I think. Well, I
Mhm.
think we all undoubtedly prefer, almost all of us, maybe there's some really, really strange people have had a lot of bad experiences or something, would rather
Mhm.
live in a kind of warlike world. But yeah, most of us, I think, would rather live in this more rich world. If
Yeah.
you had to be suspicious of everybody else to an undue degree, I think our brain, our instincts are still on. We still have that gut feeling. I think women especially, they need to and they do have the sort of gut feeling of there's a book called The Gift of Fear that talks a lot about this. It's really fascinating.
Mhm.
But yeah, undue suspicion. Yeah, we don't have to have that, and that's a great thing. That would be a tremendous use of resources to like every single damn person we saw, we'd have to question in some crazy way. That's like that'd be wasting your day and kind of leave you feeling stressed. And it's a big use of resources. That
Yeah, we'd
it's
be a
good that we don't
mess,
have to
each
do
of
that.
us. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And imagine how much more resources we would have available to us if the suspicion was turned down. I mean, look at the military budget of most countries. Like, imagine if it was like, well, we're going to get along, or if there's a fight, we'll be diplomatic about it. We don't need to have 50,000 Tomahawk missiles and a bunch of F-15s and like many nuclear bombs. And now you need nuclear bombs so that we're on an even level. And like, you know, uh, it's easy to be like, oh, well, if we just got rid of all the weapons. No, because bad actors, like we're saying, and
Yeah.
instincts and suspicion and all of that. But as far as resource allotment, if we could turn down the suspicion, if we could find a way to remember that we would probably all prefer not to be so suspicious and just turn that volume down on that a little bit, um, I feel like that would almost reinforce the fact that we don't have to be so suspicious. Like if the other guy doesn't have a bunch of weapons, and I can be like, okay, like you're not carrying a gun, I'm not carrying a gun. Great. I know you're not going to shoot me. I might have
Yeah.
to defend myself. You might come after me with a knife, but I know you don't have a gun and I don't have a gun. I can trust you not to have a gun. Great. But then as soon as somebody's like, nobody has guns. If I had a gun here, I'd be king.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then guns become necessary. And,
Yeah.
or they're all after me and I need a gun to protect myself. That sort of paranoia, you know, or any other variety of sort of negative emotions in there, kind of bringing us down back to that level because because life is scary and we are going to die and there's suffering we have to put up with. And sometimes we don't want to put up with our suffering, so we make it somebody else's problem.
Yeah. And I mean, there are times when we turn it down. There was in 1980s, Gorbachev and Reagan met, and they decided to uh, reduce the nuclear arsenals of their country. They're like, no one we both don't want this to ever happen. This is a war that cannot ever happen. Let's turn down the heat. So, but
Yeah.
that's a little like Xenia. That is, they met, they talked with each other. They met in person for multiple days. They talked with each other. They joked. They were both genial. Their personality wise, they're both genial people, and they were rational. They realized that we didn't want this to happen. This would be absolutely insane. So
Mhm.
I hope, yeah, hope maybe we can help people come to their senses in some way by talking about
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yeah. I hope for more of that in the future of humanity.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Okay, Zinnia, great talk. Anything else you want to talk about today?
I don't think we're going to find a better place to just end. This is lovely.
Yeah, seems great. Okay, well, great talking to you, and we'll find something else to talk about next time.
Sounds good. Sounds good.